Hi everyone, thanks for stopping by Pete's Garage. We're going to get back to work on the Cobra, mount our remote oil filter, make some braided hoses, and hook up the oil cooler. Now if you've ever built one of these cars, or any custom car for that matter, you'd know that sometimes even the simplest things require a painful amount of thought. And this remote oil filter is no different. So let me show you what I mean. Now there is a ton of room in here, and the goal is to try to keep these oil lines as straight as possible. And this is how this works. Underneath here where the oil filter usually goes, there's an adapter block you put onto here, and that takes the place of the oil filter, and it has an in and an out. So the oil will come out, go up to the cooler, and come back. And the best place I found, I think, to mount this will be somewhere right here, because you can see my return line will go right back to the block, and the filter will be in a good location, so it's easy to change. It's underneath that frame, but not low enough where it'll get hit. It's still above the oil pan. It should work out well. Now I can have a hose that comes out of the oil adapter into the oil cooler, out of the oil cooler into the oil filter, and out of the oil filter back to the block. Now I just have to make the bracket tack mounted in place so I can measure for the hoses. Now I have to measure how long I need to cut the braided hose. And in order to do that, you take off these ferrules here. And what you're trying to do is you want to measure from where the threads are and the threads are here, where they start. That's how long the hose needs to be. So the easiest way I found is to take a piece of stiff wire and bend it in the shape that you want it, and sort of lay it up against the ferrule where the hose is going to end. The hose is going to end right there. So you lay it there and lay it there. And you can see I put a black mark on there. So that black mark is how long the center line of the hose really needs to be. Now I can just take this wire, straighten it out, and just measure the length. Or you could just simply take the hose you're going to use, lay the wire you just bent up against the center line hose. Don't put it on the outside or the inside, because this will make it too short, this will make it too long. Put it along the center line, and you can mark and cut it right there. To me, the hardest part of making braided hoses is cutting the hose itself, because the stainless steel braiding is pretty tough. So what you do is you wrap the outside of the hose. If you have this tape, clear tape with the strands running through it, fiberglass, that makes it strong, helps. If not, you can use electrical tape. But electrical tape will melt, so when you do cut it, make sure you're using a really thin cutoff wheel, like this really thin cutoff wheel, and don't try and cut through it all at once. Just cut it, a little bit of the braiding, and rotate it as you cut it, and it should work out pretty good. That way when you're done, you still have some tape here to hold it together, and you can tighten it up and it'll fit nicely into the ferrule. Now the key to making good fittings and make sure they don't leak, is you have to cut your hose and make sure you're cutting it to this edge. And this hose has got to go on all the way up to here, like that. So when you put the end on here, make sure you put it on there carefully, get all of the wires in there, and they are sharp, so don't poke yourself. They can get sharp and they do hurt and they will bleed. And you push this on all the way. Now you push that on all the way so it's flush with the bottom, just like that. And you can come in here and clean up the inside of the hole to make sure that there's nothing folded over, and it works fine. Put some oil on the inside of here and on the threads. Then you take your fitting, fit it in here gently, just like this. And I'm not going to lie to you, it takes a little bit of effort to get the hose inside there over the first hump. And if you rotate it, it takes some time. And once you get it over there, the threads will line up. Put some oil on those threads, clamp it, and then start to screw it on with a good wrench until it's all the way about 1/8 of an inch, maybe a 1/16 of an inch away from the edge. Now here's what your finished fitting will look like. Nice and clean all the way around. Now here's a little tip for you. If you're going to have hoses, braided hoses, you want braided hoses on your car, before you go online, buy a bunch of fittings and buy lengths of braided hose. Here's what I want you to consider. If you buy fittings and braided hose for, this is a 5-foot hose, it's just under 5 feet, you're looking at maybe $100. These fittings are 20 to 30 bucks a piece, depending on if you get a straight, 90, swivel, etc. And the hose can be anywhere, depending on the diameter, from 5 to 10 bucks a foot. So you're looking at $100 for a hose like this. Before you buy all that stuff and try and make it yourself and run the risk of damaging the aluminum, ruining the anodize on the aluminum, making it look bad, go locally and look for a hydraulic hose supply or hydraulic supply and repair, hydraulic fittings. Look for something locally, because I have one local to me, and they can make a hose like this with anodized ends on it, red, blue, the way this is, with a braided hose, and they can make it for about 75 bucks, maybe 80 bucks. So you might save money by looking locally, buying your hose as a completed assembly, saving your time all the money, aggravation, and work and potential damage to your fittings. I disconnected the coil. I turned the engine over several times to get the lines purged with air and to fill them up with oil. Check the oil, make sure I have a good oil level, because the volume of the oil cooler in the lines, maybe about a half a quart or so, it's all filled up. We'll start it up, make sure we got a good oil pressure, and check for leaks. success. I let the engine heat up, let the oil heat up, put some RPMs on it to put some pressure on the lines, no leaks whatsoever, really awesome. Now I'm getting really close to taking this whole thing apart, doing the bodywork and painting it, so hit like, hit subscribe. Thanks for stopping by Pete's Garage.